Lumbini to go ahead and give her talk. Dr. Rishi will be talking to us both on keratoplasty as well as collagen cross-linking, and Dr. Murli will enlighten us about contact lenses in keratoconus.
Sir, are my slides visible?
Yeah.
Okay. So at the outset, good afternoon, one and all. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Nandakishore sir for giving me this opportunity. So in the next 10 minutes, I'll be talking about keratoconus clinical science and management algorithm. So here are a few pictures of bulges of the cornea, where the topmost picture shows keratoconus, the other being the pellucid marginal degeneration. This is a Tyrrhen's marginal degeneration showing superior thinning, and the keratoglobus, as the name suggests, where there's global. Know that keratoconus is the most common corneal ectasia. It is progressive in nature, and the incidence is about 2.3% in central India and is known to be 4 times more common in the Asians, particularly in the Indians, in the Middle East group, and also in the Southeast Asians. It is thought to have an early onset, sometime around puberty. Sometimes we are seeing cases even earlier, and gets arrested to around about 3rd or 4th decade of life. It's usually bilateral, but sometimes may present as asymmetrical. Next, coming to the presentation. So how does a patient of keratoconus come to us? So when he walks into the clinic, his basic complaint will be blurred vision. That is, he can see an object, but he says it's not very clear. And most of these patients with moderate to advanced keratoconus say that they have problems while driving in the night because of the light. This is probably because at the night time, when there is a dilated pupil and the cone being more inferior, that causes very difficulty in seeing the light, and they experience these symptoms as like glare, halos, or ghosting of the images. The other important presentation would be a frequent change of glasses, which the patient says. So with this presentation, the next would be the important clinical signs. Now, the clinical signs can be divided into those seen on external examination and those seen on slit lamp, which are most definitive. These external examination signs, since these signs are more subjective and can be seen only in advanced cases, they are very subjective. So in this, the first most common sign which we see is the Munson sign. This is nothing but when a keratoconus patient is asked to look down, if you observe, the cone of the cornea tends to push the lower lid more anteriorly, causing a bulge. And this is known as the Munson sign. And in my second picture, this is called as a Rizzuti sign, where when a light is shown on the temporal part of the cornea, in a normal patient, this is illuminated as a bright arc on the nasal limbus. But whereas in a keratoconus patient, you see that this light tends to focus on the nasal point as like an arrow. And this is called the Rizzuti sign. Next is the oil droplet. Oil droplet reflex, as the name suggests, is like when you have a dilated pupil of a keratoconus patient, and on distant direct ophthalmoscopy, you see that the area of the cone is seen as a dark reflex resembling an oil droplet. Next, coming to the most definitive slit lamp signs, the first and most important is ectasia and thinning. Even this ectasia is a little more subjective because it's only seen very clearly on slit lamp at an advanced stage. The other important signs are the Flesher's ring. Now, Flesher's ring is the most common and one of the earliest signs of keratoconus which we see. This is nothing but iron deposition at the epithelial level of the cornea. Now, this iron deposition, which gives us an idea about the size of the cone. So if you see, usually the iron gets deposited along the edges of the cone, and that is because that is where the stasis of the tear film occurs, and the iron from the tear film gets deposited in these epithelial cells. And one more important point is this is better seen when you put a cobalt blue filter rather than on the normal light. And the next one is the Vaux striae. Now, what are these Vaux striae? These are nothing but vertical lines which are seen in the posterior part of the stroma. They are typically told in the textbooks that when you apply pressure, these disappear and they return back when you loosen them. The important point about Vaux striae is you should remember that they're not seen in the decimes, but in fact, they're seen in the stromal part. The next feature is acute hydrops. This is quite rarely seen now because of patients presenting quite early, and also because of the latest diagnostic modalities which are catching keratoconus at an earlier stage. But if the patient has a very advanced keratoconus and the cornea is very thinned out, there may be a tear in the decimes, which causes the aqueous to move into the stroma, causing hydrops. And once the hydrops resolves, this can cause a deep stromal scar in the form of a decimal scarring. And this is very important to differentiate from apical scarring, because apical scarring is caused when there is breakdown of the epithelium and that grows back into the cornea. Why is it important to differentiate between apical and decimus? Is because the mode of management will differ. The next important sign is a scissor reflex. This is one of the earliest sign which is seen in keratoconus. And here it's nothing but when you do retinoscopy, when you normally in a retinoscopy, when you see light reflex either which moves with or against or parallel to the light. But in keratoconus patients, you see that there is a split of this light reflex resembling like a scissors. Hence the name scissors reflex. This is very important because amongst all the signs, this is one of the earliest signs seen in a keratoconus patients. So once you see that a patient has signs of allergy, now the other signs of allergy include looking for patient's upper papillary conjunctiva. It's always important to avert his lid to look for signs of papilla, especially in cases of vernal keratoconjunctivitis. And one of the more important features is history of eye rubbing. Always ask the patient for history of eye rubbing because it is known that this is one of the most important feature causing progression of keratoconus. So once you have a patient of keratoconus, how do you evaluate him? So based on his subjective symptoms, and when you check his visual acuity, you see that his best corrected visual acuity does not improve to 20/20, or when you do his refraction, you see a very high cylinder or very asymmetric type of a refractive error. And the most sensitive and the most important diagnostic modality will be corneal topography, which will identify keratoconus at a very early stage. The details of this will be detailed in detail by my subsequent speaker, but I just wanted to stress that there are three important features which you have to look for in topography. That is the central curvature of the cornea, and if you have any asymmetry of the cornea, that is in a normal cornea, you see that the superior and the inferior surfaces are similar, whereas in a keratoconus patient, you see there is an asymmetry, and also if there is thinning of the cornea. So these are the three important characteristic features of a patient having keratoconus on corneal topography. The classification is the modified, which we have been following, is a modified Amsler-Pumme classification, which takes presence of scarring or how much is the corneal thickness. And once you have classified keratoconus as early or advanced or grade 4 keratoconus, then you have to evaluate progression. Now, how do we evaluate progression? Again, topography is the most important and sensitive indicator because very early and subtle progression you cannot know clinically. And who are the patients whom you need to close follow-up? Those are the patients who are of younger age, patients who have any allergies, who have history of eye rubbing, or who give history of frequent change of glasses. So how do you define progression? Global consensus on keratoconus and ectatic diseases have defined progression as if you have the steepest or the flattest meridian change of a keratometric change of more than 1 diopter from the baseline, or if you have a mean keratometric change of more than 0.75 diopters, or if the corneal thickness decreases 2% from the baseline, it is defined as progression. So once you know that the patient is diagnosed as keratoconus, he has progression, then how do you manage it? Now, keratoconus is a disease which can have a particular optimal treatment or a particular protocol for its management. It's all based upon a particular patient's corneal parameters, which we look in. So with this in mind, I have devised a flow chart where suppose when you identify a patient with keratoconus, the first thing is you evaluate him with the help of clinical signs and corneal topography. And then you divide those patients into progressive types, or whether he's non-progressive or has a low risk of progression. And once you know he's non-progressive, check the patients for visual acuity with glasses and contact lenses. Contact lenses in the form of soft lenses or soft toric lenses. And if they are improving well, you please give them the glasses or contact lenses. And once you notice that these patients are non-progressive, and then you can go for surface correcting procedures like topochited PRK. And suppose if it's a very high cylinder, very regular astigmatism, you can go for a phakic IOL. In the case when there is not improving with glasses or contact lenses, and a patient is having a very high cylinder, not improving with a soft contact lens, you need to go for an RGP lens. If the patient has an eccentric cone or intolerant to that, then you go for a surgical procedure like an implant, which is called as Intacs. Now for Intacs, the main indication is either he should be of intolerant to contact lens, or should not have any kind of stromal scarring. But if the patient is very advanced and all these patient is intolerant to contact lenses, the last resort and has stromal scarring, I think the last resort is keratoplasty in the form of penetrating or deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty. Now, each management modality is also being dealt in detail by my subsequent speaker. I'll just rush through the slides. So contact lenses can be soft toric, or a rigid gas permeable lenses. And the latest are the scleral lenses, which are used in very advanced cases. Collagen cross-linking, this has almost changed the face of keratoconus because if you see in the last decade, there is a drastic change in patients going for keratoplasty because you are identifying them early, and in case of progression, you're doing a cross-linking and stabilizing them. So there are different protocols. You have the standard Dresden, you have accelerated protocols, and you have hyposmolar for thin corneas. The next is topo-guided. As I already discussed, this is basically for regular 50 microns. This is the best option to go for. Intacs, I've already told you the indication. And finally, the keratoplasty, in case of advanced cases, go for penetrating. In case of superficial stromal scar, you can go for a lamellar keratoplasty. Dr. Shetty et al. Have discussed in their in the paper management protocol called as a 5-point algorithm, where they have given importance to demographics, where they say if the patient has high-risk characteristics. Yeah, I'll just do 1 minute. If they have high-risk characteristics, you give them a grade. Progress very higher than you. So final slide saying we are still in the phase of understanding keratoconus. There is a lot to still give better treatment for keratoconus, and the most important diagnostic modality is topography, avoid eye rubbing, and the various management options depend upon the patient's situation. And the future of keratoconus is having CXL modifications and also looking at bone layer transplantation for making it more stabilize the cornea and not allowing it to go for keratoplasty. Thank you.